thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. It's great to meet you. I appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me and talking about the Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra.
Absolutely. So, you guys have been on my radar for a little while. I finally made it over to the Bridge Space the other day. Very, very great, wonderful place. And it's all been hedged off the fact that the first annual Lee Summit Jazz Fest is going to take place on June 22nd at the Bridge Space, downtown Lee Summit. But before we get into that, I kind of want to dive into your history in jazz and what's going on. So, first and foremost, I want to dive into one of the things that was pretty tumultuous for the musician community in general was living through COVID. Now we're on the 4 year anniversary. We look at the calendar, it's March, probably PTSD is flashing. How did you get through that time period as a musician and how did it change you?
Well, so for the group in particular, and I can speak to myself as well,
Yeah.
we had really just gotten started about a year before the pandemic, and it really took some of our momentum and sort of knocked us off track. And we're really now just getting back to where we kind of thought we might be a year or so after we got started. So I want to say we got started in January of 2019. That was kind of when the idea started to develop. So then it would have been a year later that we did sort of get sidetracked. And so all the performance things that we wanted to do were sort of derailed. Um, Many of us are educators, and we have recognized through teaching and education that whole experience sort of derailed so many things that we had kind of come to know and basically old habits that we had gotten into as far as teaching goes. And so we did have that to fall back on and kind of keep us going and grounded in the things that we're passionate about. For me, it's teaching media education over here at Summit Technology Academy, and for many of the others, it's private lessons or teaching band and even orchestra. And so, I mean, we were able to sort of lean back onto our day jobs and sort of put the jazz orchestra on a side burner and then get into that again after time went on.
So let's ultimately go back to the Nexus, the beginnings in January of 19 of the Jazz Orchestra. How did all of this come together? Who were the main players, and how did you
Yeah.
all get into a room and say, we're going to do it?
Well, it happened. It's a interesting story. It's a mildly interesting story. It happened when we were all at our music convention, and the state music conference takes place every January down at Osage Beach at Margaritaville, which was Tantera at the time. Classic Missouri convention location, and so many of us had just come out of a concert from another group that kind of got us thinking, hey, we could use a little community group on our side of town. We could use something, an opportunity to play. Several of us would play from time to time in combos, and we play in the school district. We do various events around, and we do cover bands and we do jazz combos and stuff. But we really were just kind of standing in the lobby of Margaritaville and looking around and like, hey, somebody call Mira over here. She's teaches up north, but she could play trombone. So before long, we're looking around the lobby and we could just kind of see the band coming together. I'm a piano player, and a good friend of mine and former student is David Turtelo, and he plays bass in the group. And a former friend of mine from college is Brandon Johnson. He teaches at Lee Summit West. He plays drums with us. Bob Harvey is a Kansas City Jazz Orchestra player,
Yeah.
and he retired from the school district a few years ago. And so, really, at that point, we put our first rehearsal on the calendar, kind of right there in the lobby of the hotel, and decided we were going to try to rehearse once a month and just see what happened. The idea at the time wasn't even about becoming the Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra. It was so many people from all over Kansas City, all the way up north, and even over on the Kansas side, kind of all around the city. And I think I would say I was probably the biggest cheerleader for, hey, I think this is Lee Summit's group. Like, as we look around the community here in Lee Summit, I've been a big fan, and I've played in the Lee Summit Symphony a number of times, and I was kind of looking at us as sort of, well, we could become a jazz version of the Lee Summit Symphony, and we can start a little bit small, and we can kind of see where we can develop concerts and that kind of thing. And so we went through the idea of like, well, let's name ourselves something Kansas City based or something educator based. And it really kind of came back around to, let's look at the community of Lee Summit and see if we can't put together something that we feel like the city is missing. And like I said, now 5 years later, it's really starting to kind of click where we kind of expected we would be able to get within a couple of years. So we're pretty excited about some of the opportunities. Of course, the Jazz Festival this summer, which we can talk about. And then we're playing monthly at the 1909 Club, which actually just started in February. And so we're doing that on, it seems like the fourth Tuesday of the month. So I want to say the last Tuesday, but it seems like it's the fourth Tuesday of the month. And that's super exciting to kind of be that resident house band, which is kind of a long tradition in the jazz world, to have a big band that sits in and reads and plays and jams and that kind of thing.
So I'm glad you said Club 1909 because when I look at this lineage of Lee Summit, now I got here in January 2020, and as you very well know, Lee Summit's kind of a bustling metropolis of its own. I mean, it's a satellite of the KC Metro, but there's a lot going on. I mean, it's a pretty active city. So
Yeah,
Club
for sure.
1909's come around, and we can't forget the inescapable shadow of one of the most famous people in jazz that came from this community, which is Pat Metheny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And every
yeah,
time when I really ramped up my interviews in January 2020, when I said Lee Summit, instantly Pat came up and I have a million stories about him. So there
yeah,
is a very rich tapestry already, just with that being said. So it only
yeah.
makes sense for this and the orchestra to house at 1909, to have its
Mm-hmm.
first annual festival. So I guess that's my lean in right here. It seems as though there's this wave that's just kind of cresting for Lee Summit, for the jazz scene.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, who knows where we are in the architecture of it, but does it
Yeah.
seem as to you as though we're really kind of hitting a good place?
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I mean, when it really sort of resonated with me was in, shout out to Seth Allen at Libations and
Yeah.
Company and the 1909 Club for being such an advocate for classic jazz and traditional jazz and also pushing the envelope into other groups and that kind of thing, and blues, of course. But yeah, I think it really resonated with me when I was down in Lee Summit, and pick any night of the week, well, towards the later half of the week, not on Mondays, but you can hear that jazz just wafting out from the second story in the 1909 Club, and it's just filling the whole street and the whole neighborhood. And it's really kind of cool to look around and to see that club, and then to see every place else that's bustling around there. And you can go hear a DJ across the street, or you can go hear classic jazz upstairs at the 1909 Club.
I heard that maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I heard music coming out, and I was like, "Where's that coming from?" And it was more of
Yeah,
like a
love it.
rockabilly vibe. But when
Yeah.
you talk to a lot of the old musicians from maybe the McShann days and all of those earlier, maybe 70s, 80s days, I mean, even earlier than that, 12th Street was just full of music. Like
Mm-hmm,
I mean,
mm-hmm,
you just walk the whole avenue. We were the Paris of the Plains. So it's
mm-hmm,
like it's
mm-hmm.
so good to hear in a community that's pretty vibrant like downtown Lee Summit to have that element. It seems like it was missing for a while, and it seems like a natural fit to have that going on right now.
Yeah, for sure. And with this sort of new 1909 Club gigs, I mean, the crowd was full, the space was full, the tickets were sold out. We're feeling the energy from the crowd, and the group is, as you might imagine in those big bands, you're going to have kind of a different personnel every time you put it together, different people. And so a lot of fun meeting new people, different people that we haven't played with. But going back to kind of our core is educators, kind of, who frankly, we'll, it's kind of cliche to say that, we're teaching and we don't get to sort of dust off our chops as much as we want to, or dust off our horns or whatever. But it's really been great to kind of keep us connected. And when we're not playing at the 1909 Club, let's say we're playing at Bridge Space for a holiday concert, we like to have our students come out and get involved. I teach a media technology class where we do live streaming and multicam events. And several times I've had my students participating on the kind of production side of things. So education is really central to what we're trying to do. Um, there's students in the, or there's players in the group that are my former students. As a 20-year teacher here in Lee Summit, that's a wide range of ages, but there's a couple of former students in there and a couple of retired educators. And so I think that you mentioning Pat Metheny, the thing about him getting his start kind of in a group like this, just kind of taking his guitar out when he was just a teen or preteen. I don't remember all the details, but I know it was something like this where it's like, hey, sit in over here and start to cut your teeth and see how it goes. And of course, it's always at first it's always a little sketchy, and then it goes on from there. So we hope to
So
lean into that education a little bit more too, and kind of keep connected.
I think the thing that's very hopeful about educators doing this is that there's two things. A, you guys haven't given up on your dream. You guys are living it in a different incarnation. And the whole adage with students of do as I say, not as I do. I mean, you guys are
Mm-hmm.
doing it. It's not like you're saying, this is what you do, this is the note you hit, this is how you do it. You guys are doing it and showing them. There's a proof in the pudding that's very evident with what you guys are, and you're creating a generational torch that's getting passed on to the next generation.
Yeah, I hope so. That's for sure. And when I see somebody we're putting the band together, I got to give credit to a couple other people. Matt Willis is a teacher over in Blue Springs, actually teacher of the year in Blue Springs, and a finalist for state teacher of the year. So these are not just people that hide in the halls of the band world. They're especially in his case, he's out there doing awesome things. But he's helping with kind of the personnel from month to month for different events. And when he says, "Hey, we need a saxophone player," and I can go, "Oh, Chad Fisher is a former student. Why don't you reach out to him and see if he's teaching in Grandview now and Martin City Middle School." So lo and behold, now we've got that person in there. So it's really kind of fun to be able to connect those people and see that. And like you said, multi-generational, because I won't be able to do this forever. And I start thinking about like what it like, is this something that we can keep going?
Yeah,
I mean, you look at like a Village Vanguard that's been going since 1960, whatever, as the
yeah.
Thad Jones, Mel Lewis big band, and then evolving. And I'm thinking, I mean, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I feel like the Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra can kind of find a foothold, just like the Lee Summit Symphony. Now, years after its founding, it's not going anywhere, and it's selling out John Knox Pavilion, and we kind of hope to maybe latch the jazz orchestra on as well and see it stick around as part of Lee Summit too.
I just interviewed the legendary bassist Rufus Reed a few weeks ago
Nice.
for Jam Magazine, and I did it specifically because there was a reference point to Kansas City. He met Thad Jones here whenever he came, and they went and got ribs and hung out. And Thad said, "You got to go to New York," because at the
Yeah.
time I think he was in Chicago getting his degree at Northwestern.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So, but I got a quick Pat story based on
Okay.
what you
Love it.
just said. So,
Love it.
Dave Brubeck's son, Chris, I
Mm-hmm.
interviewed him, and he was like kind of getting his gears straight because he's all over the world and has so many people he's dealing with. And he's like, all right, Lee Summit, got a story, got a Pat Metheny story. I
Mm-hmm.
guess when they came to do the
Mm-hmm.
major production in the 70s of Jesus Christ Superstar, there was some unionized strike or something. So they
Okay.
had to find local talent. And there was this stud young guy that was a
Yeah.
really good musician who was a Pat
Yeah.
Metheny, but they had him play bass and his
Yeah.
hair was very short at the time. And I think
Yeah.
they were going to put the picture in the star, and he just didn't want it in there because he didn't look the way Pat
Yeah.
Metheny should look. So it's
Yeah.
weird how things change. He's the guitar god now with the hair. So at that
Yes.
time, it was a different story. But there's so many of those vignettes, and that was kind of the beginning. There was a book that came out on him, and he did do that. He was hustling a lot in high school, really going out, going downtown, running all over the place, you
Yeah.
know. So
Well, when I started teaching in Lee Summit, we didn't really have jazz bands at the high school.
yeah,
And when I got here, it was like, hey, let's do jazz band. And frankly, if I go back to where the Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra started, it was because we saw a community band from the St. Louis side. I mean, St. Louis, a lot of their high schools will have jazz band in the school day, and that's got its pros and cons. But when we look at like what we're doing for education, when you're getting students involved in improvisation, and they're playing in a jazz group, so it's one per part. It's not like you can sit in that third chair and kind of hide. So I feel like jazz in the world of teaching is really, really valuable, and it's definitely come a long ways since I came to the district 20 years ago. And I've actually kind of gone full circle because I'm not as involved with the teaching on the music side of things as I was over the years now.
And at colleges, it's synonymous anymore. I mean, that used to be kind of, back in the day, 20, 30 years ago, it was kind of starting. But,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lineage of Bobby Watson just harvesting a crop of cats that have made this
Mm-hmm.
town a place that's a destination now. I
Yeah.
mean, Kansas City used to be a springboard. Now people want to come here and stay, like Adam Larson and a lot of other guys. So I'm curious in your lineage, how did this love of jazz and being a musician, how did all of this begin with you?
Right. Well, I can credit that to education as well, and to the band directors that I had growing up. And if I go back to really when I first got into jazz band in middle school, and it was in the Raytown South middle school jazz band, and the director's name was Brenda Keck, and she just retired a few years ago, and still is one of probably the greater educators that middle school jazz has ever seen. And just with the energy, in fact, she was the director of a student of mine who went to Ray South Middle School, and now he plays drums in the American Idol house band. So whenever American Idol's on, you can turn on and see RJ Kelly in the drum set there. But that's when it started, is and it's standing up and playing a terrible solo on a tenor saxophone, and and blues, because like we played a lot of blues, and sort of getting into it and realizing that I enjoyed that. And then we didn't really have much of a high school band, but I really loved teaching, and I loved marching band. And my high school band director, Barry Hartman, and orchestra director, Kurt Mosier, who's now the director of the Lee Summit Symphony, musical director. And so I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And we got a jazz band going at the high school for a little bit. But then when I got to my undergrad, I almost didn't keep doing jazz because I was a piano player, to kind of fill a gap when I was in high school. And I wasn't really classically trained, like really classically trained. I took lessons for a number of years, but I almost got out of playing until, again, one of those music teachers saw me and said, "Hey, I hear you play piano. Why don't you come in and audition?" And I was like, "Well, I don't play. I'm kind of so-so." And then went in there and was able to, I mean, I didn't realize at the time that even just being able to read chord changes as a freshman in college was not too bad. I mean, my chord voicings weren't great, but I knew that going in. So I got into the bands at Missouri State. I was drum major of the marching bands there for 4 years, and really, again, total music educator nerd. And then when I graduated from there, I went and got a master's in jazz arranging and composition from the University of North Texas. And I was a teaching assistant there for Dan Hurley, who just passed away a week or two ago, one of the great educators of
Yeah.
jazz and jazz theory. And just a warm-hearted human that kind of showed me a way to be an educator in the jazz world. And taking that and realizing that I always wanted to teach, and just coming back to the area where I grew up, when Lee Summit West opened is when I started in 2004, and have been in Lee Summit since then. I've been trying to do jazz when I can, writing music when I can, but also, doing the family and the teaching thing as kind of consumes a lot of time as well. So never as much time as I wish, but
Yeah, we never have enough. So let me ask you
yeah.
this. What was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away?
If I go back to when I grew up in Raytown, I would go see Doug Talley
Yeah.
and Paul Smith and Steve Leonard and a guy named Bud Haley, who was a teacher in the Raytown area. I would go over to see them at a little kind of hole in the wall bar in Raytown called Medlin's, and I wasn't old enough to be in there, but Bud Haley would pretend to be my dad for the times when I was there. And if the server would ask, "Hey, is he with you?" he would nod and say yes. And so, I mean, I remember sitting there and just, you learn so much when you watch Paul Smith
Yeah.
play piano. and Doug Talley just sit in and have, I mean, how many years ago was this? This was 30 years ago easily, if not a couple more. And you learn about um like sort of the courtesy of jazz, and sort of like trading fours and taking a chorus, and when one person takes three choruses, the next person takes about three choruses, and you see the way they listen to each other and the way they interact with each other. So those are some of my most early memories as far as jazz. When we were in high school, some of us road trip down to the Eureka Springs Jazz Festival and saw Chick Corea, Dave Weckl, John Patitucci. I mean, still to this day, those things like that, like I can close my eyes and remember being there, and seeing that group. I'm gonna see John Patitucci in New York in a couple of weeks. I'm super excited about that. My wife is a little less excited. She's not as big of a jazz fan, but and I'm like, it's Chris Potter and Brian Blade. She's like, I don't know who these people are. And I was like, any one of them could headline. That's how good this trio is. They're blowing me away. She's looking at me like, okay, well, I'll go with you as long as I can have a cocktail while we're there. Okay, fair enough. We're in. So
You
so
know,
uh, those are some of my memories there.
I get it, and I do that with my wife, and she really
Mm-hmm.
embraces it. But it's
Yeah.
like, I remember before the pandemic happened, like March 3rd, we went to the Nelson and Bill Frisell was playing. She was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Oh,
like, this is
nice.
major league stuff. She's like, what's it
Mm-hmm.
going to be like? I'm like, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
No idea with Bill. But,
Yeah.
there's been other shows like Miguel Zanon and whatnot. And it's like, once she leaves, she's like, wow, like the group that was there. Like I
Yeah.
saw him at the Folly about 2 years ago. Man, that group that he had, they were a tight-knit group. It was a
Mm-hmm.
trio. They were smoking. Like they've
Yeah.
been playing for decades. And when you see
Yeah.
that live, it's unparalleled. It's unmatched.
Yeah.
Like what you guys are doing. You
Yeah.
have to see an orchestra. You have to see a large group like that live. You just
Yeah.
do. Like,
And so fun. Yeah. Just a different type of energy.
yeah, yeah,
It's a little loose around the edges. We're calling shots. We're calling the form sometimes on the fly, one more time on the chorus, whatever. And it's fun. It's a whole different thing than what we're used to. And actually, the size of that space up there was it just seems like just a perfect fit, because the band you just fit up there. You don't have a lot of elbow room, but the band fits up there, and it sounds like we didn't amplify ourselves, so we kind of kept it traditional jazz. No solo mics, but we did have a vocalist in there. But yeah, it's just a fun energy and a lot of traditional classic things, a lot of things from the Count Basie library,
yeah,
um, and traditional jazz, medium swing, love it. I'm
yeah,
counting it off most of the night right about here,
yeah,
and that's a little bit of Latin every once in a while. A
yeah.
couple of tunes. I'm trying to get some tunes that I've written and out printed out and played, and that's a reminder to kind of dust that off and do a little bit more of that.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a natural lead in to the Lee Summit Jazz Fest, first annual downtown, June 22nd. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, and this is going to be a lot of fun. And so when the Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra kind of got our start, we were kind of looking for a venue, and I just happened to swing by Bridge Space, and I don't even exactly remember the nature of why I stopped by there, but I saw the space at Bridge Space and thought, oh, this would be kind of a cool space for a concert. And I talked to Ben Rayo, who's the owner there, and kind of a downtown Lee Summit advocate as well, and he was all for it. Yeah, when do we start? When do we do this? What are we going to raise funds for? So I say that because Bridge Space and Ben Rayo and Colin up there at Bridge Space as well, they've been kind of the driving force behind this. And as a player in the jazz group, we're kind of there and helping to put together the artists and kind of reaching out to different people. And so they've been the driving force behind this. But they've been doing Chili Fest there at Bridge Space for a number of years, so they've been doing events out there in the back patio. And so this idea of like, let's have a day where we just put a bunch of jazz groups together, and we have some food trucks and some art tents, and we have some people come out there and teach a painting class or sell their crafts or whatever. And so Yeah, I mean, it's really taken off, and just how fast some of the artists we were able to book. The lineup looks good, and like the band, like we're gonna play, the Back Alley Brass Band is gonna close out the night. They always have a fun party vibes, and the Sons of Brazil, Chris Burnett is playing with his combo, Amber Underwood, um, Ebony Fondren is playing, and then we have a couple of student groups that we're going to try to feature as well to kind of kick things off with kind of a best of Lee Summit group of students, and then a group from the Kansas City area youth jazz, which is a group that does a lot of kind of private lessons and studies and combos, and it should be a lot of fun.
So if anybody wants any more information on the festival or you and what you're doing, what's the good
Yeah.
business?
So your best bet for the Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra is to probably just search Lee Summit Jazz on Facebook. And then the Jazz Festival, the link will be in there as well, but it is through the BridgeSpace website, which is bridgespace.us/jazz. And that's going to get you the tickets. They got tickets on sale now, three for $20, I think. And there'll be a little bit of information about when our next performance is, whether we're doing the fourth Tuesday of the month at the 1909 Club or the last Tuesday, or if both of those things are the same thing. I do know it's going to be April 23rd. I don't know when your podcast delivers or publishes, but I know that our next 1909 Club will be April 23rd.
Okay. So let's end this on a good note. We
Yeah.
get off the call, time machine pulls up in front of your place. You can go anywhere in the history of jazz and see one show. Where are you going?
I would go back to the the Blue Note. I believe it was mid 90s. I don't remember the exact date. I should know it off the top of my head, but it would be the Keith Jarrett Trio at the Blue Note. It's a 6 CD set, and I would go there for all 6 sets. And if I could only go for one, I would do the opening number on Green Dolphin Street, which I think was like maybe the fourth set that they played, the third night, first set. And yeah, so that would be, I'm a big fan of Keith Jarrett. Never got to see him live.
Yeah,
And I would definitely go back to live at the Blue Note.
that's very unique. Very good answer. Shawn, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir, for your time. I look forward to seeing you guys either at 1909 or at the Jazz Fest. Keep up the good work, man.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
We'll do it again sometime.
Oh, yeah, for sure.